This is one of the most well-intentioned mistakes that I commonly see in Valorant, and it's such a shame because it costs smart players so many rounds. The good news is that this tip is pretty easy to adopt and understand, and it can have a massive impact on your game as a whole. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be the first to see more content designed to help you rank up just like this. Keep in mind that these tips did work for me, but you may need something different. That is up to your own judgment. Hello everyone, my name is Atchax, and this is why you should stop playing time in Valorant. In order to understand why you might want to stop playing time, we need to unpack what playing time really means. It's a simple enough concept on the surface, but as per usual, the devil is in the details. Playing time means using the win condition of the clock running out to win the round with minimal risk, because you can't lose a fight if there isn't a fight to lose. That's a fantastic advantage. In some cases, it's almost unbeatable. So why am I advising against it? Well, the problem is, that's really the only advantage you get. Playing time usually means playing farther back, holding more passive angles, and avoiding peeking. This diminishes your map presence and makes you lose fights. Here's why. Less map presence gives the opponents more space in less time at less cost. In other words, playing time might actually end up giving opponents the time they need to retake and win when you don't have to. Besides that, your team usually ends up playing worse angles for a direct fight, and that tends to result in more lost fights. I don't know about you, but if I have to take a duel against two players, I'd much rather take both at this angle than play here and wait for them to drop and surround me or trade me off. These drawbacks don't matter if you don't have to take fights. But if timing is such that the retakers will be able to take the site quickly enough that utility won't be able to close out the round, then you will have to take fights if you want to win. In this case, playing time can be a fatal mistake. There's definitely a time and place for playing time, but so many players make the mistake of always playing time, regardless of the situation. In instances where opponents are far away and your team gets an early plant, playing time may be a fantastic option. But far too often, I've seen teams call out to play time when there is a full team of defenders about to launch a retake, and there is a 0% chance that they will be able to avoid a fight and still win the round. It is crucial to develop the skill of recognizing the opponent's positioning and timing, and using that to realize when you will have to take fights. That way, if you do, you can take good ones, instead of shooting yourself in the foot by surrendering map presence and playing time. This is going to be much easier with the visual, so let's hop over to the map. I'm going to do this in order of easiest to most difficult. Keep in mind that there are a bunch of different ways to read opponents. I'm going to talk about the same methods I use because I am most familiar with them. If you have a different method that works really well for you, that's awesome. Alright, let's hop into it. The easiest situation is when I create a shift on purpose. This might be done with a fake, or maybe I'm predicting a recovery, or I've used utility to cut off an area and drive some kind of repositioning. In these cases, opponents are moving in a manner I can predict because I intended for them to move like that and then gave them good reason to. This way I know generally where they will be, and this knowledge is supplemented by hearing rotations or getting callouts from our lurker. This is the easiest situation because the opponents have an immediate reason to be in a certain place at a certain time. I'm not relying solely on habit or previous rounds. The second easiest situation is when callouts are used to determine positioning. Callouts give you a concrete anchor off of which to build and track the opponents. Since you have a definite location at a point and there is only so far they could move or are likely to move in a certain amount of time, you have a solid radius as to where they can or are likely to be. The more recent the callout, the smaller the radius, and the more reliably you can read the opponents. The third easiest situation is when habit is used to determine positioning. This takes advantage of the fact that most players like to play in a certain way, especially where they are strong or effective. If an opponent loves to play catwalk, it's not unlikely they will be playing catwalk. Keeping track of which agent plays which area in your head gives you a starting point to model their actions over the course of the round. In this case, visualization can be used to track the opponent from the last known location. The problem is that no concrete information is used, so if the opponent switched it up, you might be caught off guard. This is one that you will want to scale for your opponents. If the opponents are unpredictable, it might be better to hold off on this approach. If they are predictable, it could be better to use it more. the most important thing for me is combining all of these in visualization. Visualization is the ability to picture the board and how the pieces are moving. It's great for planning multiple steps ahead or predicting the opponent's next moves. It's also great for reading. There is a level of understanding that needs to be developed from practice, effort, and experience of how characters move. It's important to understand how fast players move over time in order to visualize where they can go. On top of that, it's important to develop a sense of how opponents will react to certain things. This will help you know what they are moving towards. Once you have a good handle on these things, you can keep track in your head of where opponents are. This will allow you to know the opponent's positions even though you can't directly see them. I would recommend largely doing a 2D top-down aspect of visualization, basically like the minimap. This is especially good when you are starting out. With a little bit of practice and conscious thought, you can start reading opponents like a book. When should you play time? The key moment is when the opponents don't have enough time to clear the site and defuse. At that point, their position deteriorates quickly because they have to start the defuse, and you get to play Assassinate the Diffuser. It's a very vulnerable position for the retaking defenders, and it usually makes playing time worth it. This is especially effective in low number situations for both teams. So if you aren't playing time, what should you do instead? Push into defender spawn? Well, if that's the best option, by all means, go ahead. But there is the more moderate option of holding a cover angle. Cover angles are exactly what they sound like, angles where you have the option of taking cover. This is a cover angle which is very strong against Heaven. And this is a corner that is very strong against players who don't check corners. The ironic thing is that playing cover angles often takes up more time than literally playing time. It usually takes opponents quite a while to clear out someone who keeps periodically peeking, not to mention that they might get their head taken off while trying. It's a stark contrast to defenders taking tons of space uncontested, a contrast that often means winning the round. Cover angles tend to be very strong against one other position. Figure out where they are and use them to win. It's oftentimes a good idea to watch pro gameplay because you can see where some of the best angles are from the best in the game. Almost all of my favorite angles have come from seeing how pro players play Afterplants. This right here is my favorite angle in the entire game. It's a cover angle that is incredible against Heaven. At the same time, it's reasonably good against Tree and Generator. Of course, the benefits of better fights and more time and map control don't come for free. There is increased risk of being picked off while playing them as opposed to playing time, even if they overall result in more round wins. That's why I'm going to break down how to be more successful playing cover angles. The key is really counterintuitive, at least for me. Repositioning and choosing not to repeat the same angle over and over are both typically a pretty good move. However, that might not be the best way to play cover angles. There is an advantage that makes standing your ground and re-peeking very viable with cover angles. The explanation for that is different depending on the angle and difficult to articulate, but the short answer is geometry, so let's just go with that for now. Retaking defenders are frequently able to pressure one side of a site in order to force a post-plant attacker to give up space or be eliminated. The geometry of the angles takes away a lot of the defender's leverage. This allows one player to control a disproportionate amount of space for a fantastic period of time. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's typically not about getting fragged. It's mostly about preventing the opponents from advancing. While you will be trying to land that frag, it's more important to stay alive and assert map control. As a result, it might not be best to turn cover angles into one-and-done auto-crouch fights. Use good movement and counter-strafing to delay, Prefire, and deny space to the opponents. For this end, learning how to Prefire with strafe shots is absolutely key. It can find an elimination, and it goes a long way towards preventing opponents from easily dislodging you and taking space. Ironically, this stance often takes up more time than actually playing time, and players can use this as a bridge to get from the opponents having serious potential for a retake to that perfect playing time situation where utility will seal the deal. At the end of the day, developing your game sense in terms of timing and positioning is key so that you can determine when you will have to take a fight, and therefore when you ought to be playing time, playing cover angles, or pushing. Playing time is a valuable strategy that can be used to destroy opponents. However, many players make the crucial mistake of defaulting to playing time regardless of the situation. Shifting away from this and towards stronger tactics like cover angles might be the most important change to make it so that when you do have to take a fight, you win it.